Kia ora. Right, so this section I'm going to talk about now is also in the test. It's all about the accounting standards framework, the New Zealand Accounting Standards Framework. Right. So we're aware of the External Reporting Board, okay, which has been set up and has been given the strength of law with the Financial Reporting Act and the Companies Act and the Crown Entities Act and various acts that require certain entities to report using generally accepted accounting practices, or GAAP, right? So there's some simple documents for you to read through that will give you a good understanding. You can also take these documents into the test, all right? So if I go to the reporting requirements and I go down to Accounting Standards Framework, this is what the test is going to be about, right? So there's 20 questions. Some are true and false, and some of them are, choose the right answer, A, B, C, or D, right? So if you have a look at it here, it gives you an overview. This is the accounting framework, right? So it's a document. You can print it off, you can take it in, you can highlight parts, you can take it into the exam. Okay, so there's the framework, originally issued in April 2012, updated in 2015. Okay, the contents, it's not a very big document, okay, 18 pages in length. Okay, so if you knock out some of the contents page for a start, and you're already going down. Okay, abbreviations. Okay, the introduction's worthwhile reading. Okay, so some key points in there. So the New Zealand Accounting Standards Framework was developed using a user needs approach. It is based on multi-standards. Okay, so there's standards for different entities. Approach that uses tiers. Okay, so there's a strata, 1, 2, at least 2 for the for-profit sector, public accountable, and then there's 4 tiers in the public benefit entities. Okay, all right. So that's what it's developed on. Okay, so pretty much it was based on the international accounting framework, okay, so the one that's been sent internationally, right? So there is this, everybody's seeking commonality in reporting, so that we are becoming sort of quite international now, or very international now, and therefore for New Zealand's credibility, etc., its company's credibility, if it complies with the standards that all these other countries are complying with, business is a lot easier, right? It's easier for a foreign company to buy a New Zealand company, for example, okay, because they know that they're going to comply with GAAP, okay. So there's 100 countries that are bought into this, so that's the majority of countries use these standards, right? So New Zealand's standards mirror, okay, what these international standards are. So any localisms is normally an addition. We don't diminish the standards. We might add, but we don't diminish, right? Typically, they only look to create standards that aren't there, right? So they're not looking to say, hey, we don't like your standard, we'll create a different one. It's more like there's a gap for we've got a certain thing here particular to our environment that we need a standard on, and there isn't an international standard that we can base it on, right? So that's more where we might have something that's unique, okay? So the introduction is really worthwhile knowing, and it's also worthwhile being very clear that the framework is targeted at 2 sectors. Okay, so there's the for-profit entities, and then there's the public benefit entities, right? So for-profit entities, obviously they're in business to make a return. Okay, public benefit entities, their main mission is not to make a return for investors or anything like that. It's to provide benefits to the public. Okay, public benefit entities. Okay, so you'll find places where you can see examples of that, right? Okay, so there are some public entities that are for profit. e.g. ports and airports and those sorts of things, right? So they're deemed to be public entities, but they actually are for profit, okay? So they fall into there. Okay, so our course is mainly around the for-profit entities, right? And that's where we are looking at the standards. But we need to have an understanding of the framework, because the framework encompasses things outside of profit as well, public benefit entities. Okay, so clearly stated, 2 sectors, and then there's tiers within those sectors, and there's a really good layout here. Okay, bear in mind that there's only 2 tiers for the for-profit entities. You're either publicly accountable or you're not. Okay, publicly accountable, again, the classics is you're on the share market. There's and the not publicly accountable is you're not on the share market, or you're not a fund manager, or you're none of those sorts of things, right? Okay. Really, tier 2 just means that there is some sort of disclosures that you're not to, there's a reduced disclosure regime, RDR, okay, there it is there, RDR, okay, so reduced disclosure regime, okay, if you're in tier 2. So just be clear that there's 2 sectors, one sector's got 4 tiers, which is the public benefit entities, so even the smaller ones of those are required to produce reports, and they need to comply with the standards, right? There's some reduced standards for tier 3 and tier 4, okay? Up until about 2012, there was tier 3s and 4s for non-for-profit entities as well, okay? So there was a lot of, probably compliance sort of stuff for small, medium-sized businesses, where they now are sort of exempt from this, right? So if we go down to, there's a note here, 33, withdrawal of for-profit tier 3 and 4, okay? So those are removed. The enactment of the Financial Reporting Act 2013 and the associated enactments has resulted in the majority of small and medium-sized for-profit entities no longer having to prepare financial statements that comply with standards issued by the External Reporting Board. Okay, as indicated in the initial accounting standards, the XRB has withdrawn for-profit tiers 3 and 4 as a result, because they are no longer needed. The updated New Zealand Accounting Standards therefore has only 2 for-profit tiers. Okay, so that is great news for small, medium-sized businesses, right? Okay, they will be producing accounts, and they will be typically calling those special purpose accounts, okay, and the special purpose will be mainly for compliance with tax. They'll also, for their bank, right? So the bank manager or the bank, the lenders may be asking them for a set of accounts, right? So, but these small, medium-sized businesses, they're not publicly accountable. They're not normally having to produce sets of, managements in-house, okay? There will be some of those that will, in other words, where the management and the ownership is separated, and there's more than 10 shareholders, for example. They need to opt out of reporting. So that's covered in the Companies Act. Okay, so there's 2 other strong acts, legislation really that's behind this. It's the Companies Act 1993 and the Financial Reporting Act 2013, right? So those are the 2 key ones in our course, right? So, but then obviously there's a whole lot of acts that cover the public benefit entities, Crown-owned enterprises. There's the Charities Act. There's a whole lot of other acts that basically govern them. Okay, so if you were to read this guideline, you should have no problem in answering the 20 questions that you will be pitched. Okay, it's a relatively straightforward read. Okay, all right. Highlight some important parts. You can take this document and so don't need to rote learn anything. Okay, just get a good background understanding, right? It even mentions the legislation down here, and obviously there's another key one there, the Financial Markets Conduct Act. Okay. All right, so that's that document there. Okay, it's not a standard, all right, so the framework is not a standard, but what they do have is they do have a standard which tells you how to apply the framework. Okay, so there is a standard that tells you application of the accounting framework. Okay, again, you can print this off and take it in, but it just really gives you a little bit more detail and explanatory note on the various tiers, okay, moving between tiers and those sorts of things, right? The questions aren't sort of pitched to that sort of detail, okay? You can print this off, you can take it in, but typically most of the answers you'll find in that previous guideline, okay? So bear in mind the framework's not a standard, but there is a standard to say how to use it, okay? And there is another document on it, which is a good one, okay? I found this quite a good read too. It's just an explanatory guide, a guide to the application of the accounting standard framework, okay? Right, again, purpose and content of the explanatory guide, okay, that's pretty straightforward. Roles of the XRB and the New Zealand Accounting Standard Board, legislative framework. Okay, so this is a really good background document as well. You can print this off and take it in as well. If you were to read the New Zealand Accounting Standards Framework document, highlight some key points, and if you were to read this one, there's no reason why you should not do well in those 20 questions, right? Especially if you can take these documents in. Okay, so that should be your preparation for those 20 questions. Those 20 questions are worth a third of the test. Okay, so it's a third of the marks. I think the test's worth 25%, so hey, this is 8% of your final grade. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to, you know, get 6, 7, 8%. All right. Okay, so that's today's. Nice, short and sweet. You've just got a bit of reading, and just make sure you take those documents in with you to the test. Obviously, if you've pre-read them, you've highlighted stuff, you're not going to be wasting time hunting this information out, right? You can just use it to validate, and you'll know where to look as well. The documents aren't big. All right, have a good day, and all the best. Have a good New Year's Eve.